This is David Griffith, editor of Police Magazine. There are many issues facing law enforcement agencies, and many of them affect officer training. The following video is a discussion of these issues. This video is sponsored by Vector Solutions. Vector Solutions for Law Enforcement is the industry leader in operational readiness technology that enables law enforcement agencies, academies, and post organizations to meet their demanding training, compliance, and preparedness objectives. The Vector Solutions public safety suite of products includes software for training management, policy distribution, personnel scheduling, equipment management, early intervention, and promoting a positive and transparent agency culture. Vector's accredited online course library includes IATLAS, NCP certified courses approved for post-annual training requirements. Trusted by 10,000 public safety agencies and 2 million first responders, Vector's purpose-built technology covers the full life cycle of personnel management from hire to retire, because readiness saves lives. For more information about Vector Solutions, please go to www.vectorsolutions.com/law enforcement. My guest is Ari Vidali. Ari is the founder and chief strategist for Vector's Acadis solution. He is responsible for developing a cohesive strategy for the company's public safety market segment, driving change management across related sales, product, and technology processes, and supporting Vector's M&A activities in the public safety space. Ari became part of the Vector team when Vector acquired Envisage Technologies, a software company he founded that develops training and compliance ecosystems. For example, Acadis for the public sector. During his 20-year career, Ari has been instrumental in developing innovative readiness strategies for military, public safety, and law enforcement commands. Ari, thank you for talking with us today.
David, it's such a pleasure and honor to be here with you today.
What do you see as one of the top challenges facing law enforcement?
Well, David, I see really two main challenges. One more generally within public safety, of which, of course, law enforcement is part of that. And then the second one for law enforcement specifically. The biggest challenge for public safety as a whole is that as an industry, we're incredibly fragmented. Like everything within public safety is fragmented. Our command and control, our systems, our data, even our radio systems are still fragmented. So there's a lot of problems when things are not unified. And then the second thing, and probably the one that's most salient for law enforcement, is what I like to call the readiness gap. We have a tremendous amount of growth in call volumes. So the amount of stressors that are put on law enforcement officers in terms of the number of calls is rapidly rising. And we have, fewer officers than we did 5 years ago. So if you think about personnel, the number of personnel that we have is going down or staying flat, and the number of calls is going up. That's going to create a gap in service, and I call that the readiness gap, and it's something that we really, really need to pay attention to, because that's going to become a problem in terms of our ability to service the needs of the citizens out there.
Well, we're also facing a retirement surge. Many officers are deciding to retire early. Some are reaching the end of their careers on a number of bases. So recruiting has become essential. What is the most important thing law enforcement agencies can do to recruit and retain the officers they have?
Yeah, David, what an important question, right? So that retirement wave that's going to happen here and is happening right now is going to further accelerate the readiness gap that I just mentioned. So we need to start to work on building pathways for people to enter into the law enforcement profession much earlier in their lifetime. So trying to figure out ways to get everything from vocational tracks into law enforcement, and doing a much, much better job, not only to recruit, but quite frankly, we've got to do a really much better job at retaining the officers we have. Like over half of officers have considered leaving the profession. We just did a survey of this, and that's a non-sustainable trend. So we have to figure out ways to retain the best and brightest that we have, and then create career tracks to bring new talent new young people into the profession as quickly as we can. And it is a monumental problem, David. This is not something that there won't be one solution to that problem. It's the industry recognizing that it needs to do something and pivot fast, and then leverage technologies to do a better job to both recruit and then provide these vocational training tracks into law enforcement.
I think a bigger issue here could be also that the officers they need to motivate them. How do you motivate your officers when those who remain on the force are feeling such a burned out situation? Their hours are longer than they used to be. They have more overtime when they don't want it, essentially, and it's becoming a real problem.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing this. I've not seen something like this in my 20 years in the industry. This is the worst that I've ever seen it. And the burnout is a function of several trends colliding. We, of course, had all the policing reform trends that were going on. We had COVID impact as well. And all of those things put together have caused real burnout. So what do we do about this? There are some technologies that are really helping to change the nature of these law enforcement organizations. So there's technologies like early intervention systems where, a technology that allows us to kind of look into the future and see trends of what might be happening with officers and figuring out ways to give them the appropriate support and time off after critical incidents that they might have been involved in, to try and mitigate some of this burnout. It is one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. It is probably one of the most traumatic jobs that a human being can go through. And oftentimes this is not properly understood, and we don't have ways to mitigate it. So with technology, there are some things we can do. Early intervention systems help us with that. Unfortunately, some of the providers of early intervention systems believe that just an algorithm is going to do the job, but actually it's all about leadership. And so using technology in conjunction with great leadership within these organizations allows us to start to bend the curve. What do I mean by that? We have a tool at Vector called Guardian Tracking, and it is an EIS, so it's an early intervention system. But what's most profound and important about this tool is that it actually is designed to not just track incidents or things that might be impacting our law enforcement organizations or the officers themselves, but it is also, and more importantly, tracking all of the incredible work that they're doing out in the field. So when a supervisor sees that an officer has done a great job, they can immediately post that as a best practice out to the rest of the force. And over time, what this does, a lot of burnout actually, David, happens because people are demoralized. They're getting all of maybe the worst that society has to throw at them, and they're not getting a lot of praise for the good work that they're doing. So what Guardian Tracking does is it actually takes all of the good things that officers are doing and it amplifies that within the department, thus changing the overarching culture that the department has and motivating those officers to continue to do all the good work that they're doing, so that they can see the impacts of highly professional policing, the good impacts that has on communities and outcomes. So that's one way to mitigate burnout, is to bend the curve of this demoralization into a highly motivational way of managing the law enforcement officers.
It sounds like your early intervention system does away with the fear a lot of officers have that early intervention is just management watching them, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, and quite frankly, once they realize that 90 to 95% of the activities that go into something like Guardian Tracking are positive and are showing, hey, this is the thing that an officer did that really impacted a citizen in a very good way, or we had a very, very good outcome, the ability to immediately message that to the rest of the organization and to celebrate that starts to change policing culture in a very positive way, and it starts to mitigate that burnout.
Let's talk about that. What is your vision for the near future in terms of structure and mission and legislative concerns and police culture?
Well, I mean, I think this changing the police culture through technology is one of our key visions. And where can we implement technology at strategic leverage points within a police department to increase that, first of all, job satisfaction, amplify all the good things that are happening, and drive best practices throughout the organization. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other aspect is policing traditionally has been non-standardized. If you look across the United States, I mean, we have all sorts of different types of training programs, for example. It's very different, the training that an officer would receive in New York versus California. But there are some really good benefits of standardizing some of the police training, at least the core of what police officers do day to day. I don't care whether you're in Alaska or Florida, you're doing certain things should be done in a very particular way. And so finding ways to standardize is important. And finally, departments need to understand that everything is interconnected. So if you have a mission, and your mission may vary depending on where you are in the United States, that mission is what drives your hiring and your policy setting. Your policies are what drive your training, right? So we need to train to the policies. Training drives behaviors out in the field, and then it's those officer behaviors that are the things that drive the outcomes. So if we have good officer behaviors out there, we're going to have great outcomes if they're aligned to the mission. If we don't, then we're going to have bad outcomes within communities. So understanding how to connect all those dots. And by the way, David, technology can really help us do that, right? It can connect the policy to the training to behavioral tracking, and ultimately tracking the outcomes within a community. And finally, I would say we are underfunded in policing. We've traditionally been underfunded, and it's not just policing, quite frankly, it's in public safety as a whole. We have not had the kind of funding that we need because the job is getting more and more complex. It's not easier to police today in 2023 than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we didn't have a lot of the issues that police officers are dealing with out there on the street. So training is going to become absolutely critical to continuing to get those great outcomes that we want within our communities.
So, what trends are you seeing in law enforcement training?
In law enforcement training, things are becoming more complex. The issues that we're dealing with are more complex, and therefore there's going to be more topics that officers are going to have to master within the profession. And so that means more training required. And this on top of a very, very stressful job with fewer hours to deal with all of the different call volumes that we have. So we've got to start leveraging technology smart, right? We've got to be able to use online learning. We've got to be able to use micro learning. We need to be able to get the time to competence for any of those topics that law enforcement officers need to learn. We need to compress that down as quickly as possible, or as much as possible, so that they can get competent faster. And technology is able to accomplish a lot of that for us with online learning, with micro learning, with mobile learning, some of these things that are just now really starting to get adopted as we see a generational shift also within law enforcement.
Well, how is this impacting the agencies themselves?
Well, it's impacting the agencies in terms of they have to start adopting new methods for both training their officers, for managing the performance of their officers, and getting much more data-driven in how they manage their departments. And so today, I said fragmentation at the very beginning of this interview, right, David, that fragmentation is one of the problems. But if you look inside most departments, modern departments today, they have a plethora of individual tools that don't really talk to each other. So they might have something for their policy management tool. They might be using another tool for training, another tool for compliance, another tool for professional standards, another tool for shift scheduling. But quite frankly, they need to start thinking about this as more of a unified approach to how they manage their department, and really leverage the technology to get data out so that they can proactively manage via information versus, sort of ad hoc. And so our notion around this is to build, all of the core tools that they need that are interoperable. That's absolutely essential for these departments in the future.
All right, so how can Vector Solutions and Acadis help address some of the fundamental problems with law enforcement training and training record management?
So, we've been spending a lot of effort on this, David, in terms of trying to figure out how to get rid of that fragmentation. So first off, we're building all the core tools and have all the core tools that a department needs in order to operate, to manage its people operations, everything around its personnel. So for everything from training to compliance to professional standards to shift scheduling. So making those interoperable and interconnected is one thing. The second thing that's a huge issue for a lot of departments is they have to be in compliance with state mandates. So the state posts, for example, mandate what a department has to do to hire individual officers. What are the requirements? They mandate what they need to do in order to train those people, and then what they need to do in order to maintain the compliance of all those officers according to state regulations. And this has been an issue for a lot of departments because they have to consistently report all of their training up to the state post. So we've just launched a tool called Agency Connect. Agency Connect is the first of its kind tool that actually integrates what the post requires for compliance with all the departments that sit underneath and automates the transfer of the required record keeping up to that state post for compliance. Takes all of the manual paperwork out of the process, and it happens fully in a fully automated way. We as Vector are the only really company that can do this because we have the majority of the post organizations across the United States using our Acadis Readiness Suite tool, and then a lot of the departments using our Target Solutions training management system that will be fully interfaced, and it will be at no cost to the departments, this additional functionality. So we're trying to streamline things so that, talk about bending that readiness gap, right? You need to use technology to create those efficiencies. So if every hour that I save an officer down on the street is an hour that they can be out there serving the public. And so we're eliminating a lot of extraneous hours in the administration of the people function within law enforcement departments. So hopefully we'll do our part to bend that curve.
Well, thank you, Ari. I appreciate your time. And thank you to Vector Solutions for sponsoring this video.
Very much appreciated, David. It's been an honor.